I'm now in my 20s and I go to this new country and they're all like fascinated by these sad stories. Why do you guys read sad stories? And there's like, but it's just to feel human emotion. But then I realized, you know why? Because there's nothing sad happening around them. They're not constantly reminded of sadness around them. People have decent life. So they look for these books to see what it looks like to live, in sadness. And I see it everywhere around me. Every time I go outside of my house, I don't want to be reminded again. And I was like, okay, so this is it. This is what life looks like on the outside. I gotta get the hell out of there and never come back. Well, I do come back, but that was the plan.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 47 of the Emigrant's Life podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. And through these stories, you can find ideas, resources, and motivation to do the same. I'm Daniel DiBiase, and my guest this week, Jadranka, is originally from Bosnia and now lives in Canada. And if you remember the episode with Boriana a while ago, between 1992 and 1995, Bosnia went through a civil war, and Jadranka was only 10 when it started. In this episode, we will cover her life in Bosnia and how she managed to move to Canada. All of that with quite a bit of laugh. When I started this podcast, I wanted to share people's stories to inspire the listeners to move to a new country, and maybe that's you. One thing I wasn't expected was to find out how much these stories opened my mind and made me see my life under a different lens. What I mean by that is that when I tell other people that I left Italy to move to the other side of the world without knowing a word of English, they say that I was brave. But after listening to stories like Jadranka, I realized that my choice was actually pretty easy. All I had to do was to apply for a visa and buy a flight ticket. I'm diminishing a little bit here, but that was pretty much it. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably are in a similar situation. But some people have to go through a much more difficult process. For some people out there, leaving their country is simply not an option, just because of the country they were born in. I hope that if you are uncertain whether making the jump into the unknown and move abroad, these stories can give you the motivation to pull the plug. Moving to a new country is not easy, don't get me wrong, but as you will hear here, it could be much more challenging. Before moving to my conversation with Jadranka, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss any episode. And if you like what we do, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Sometimes we need some extra motivation, and your review helps a lot. So thank you very much for leaving your reviews, I very much appreciate it. And now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jadranka. Hi Jadranka, thanks for being on the show.
Hey Daniel, how are you?
I'm great.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for taking time to share your story on my podcast. Let's start from the beginning. So where are you originally from?
I am from Bosnia. It's a country in Southeast Europe, very close to your homeland, Italy. Part of, for those people that are listening around the globe that haven't heard of Bosnia, because it is a very tiny country. It's part of what used to be called Yugoslavia. So one small country that used to be part of that big block of countries. And I now live in Canada, Toronto. Yes.
Toronto, Canada, yeah. Same country, the other side.
Mm-hmm. East Coast versus West Coast in this podcast.
Yeah. Coast to coast.
Yes.
And what age did you leave your country?
So I moved to Canada when I was 30 years old, exactly. So for the first 30 years, those detrimental years, I actually lived in Bosnia. And I never lived anywhere else outside of Bosnia. We have, through most of my growing up childhood and young adult life, very limited in terms of how much and where we can travel. It has changed recently, and we do travel now, like from Bosnia, people do travel around Europe without visas for the short period of time for tourist visits. But for the most of the time that I lived in Bosnia, my life was mainly focused on Bosnia and some of the regional countries. And I have never lived outside of there until I moved to Canada, which was when I was 30 years old.
Okay. Because I interviewed another person on this podcast who was also from Bosnia, Boriana. And she really had a hard time living in the country. Like you said, it was like a really, really hard to live there, Bosnia back at the time. But
Yes.
So I guess even you've been through the civil war in Bosnia.
Yes. So the way it went is like we lived in Yugoslavia when I was about 10 years old. the civil war started over the breakup of the former Yugoslavia. And the 6 countries that were part of the Yugoslavia have decided to split up. But some of them, and particularly Bosnia, had a difficult time processing that because we were sort of a country that was a mix of people from all of these other Yugoslavian countries, right? So we have three ethnical groups within the country, and then we had a civil war because they couldn't get to an agreement as to what are we going to do with the country, with the territory, how are we going to split it up. So for years, we were in a full-blown civil war. And then after those 4 years, I want to say pretty sure for 5, 6 years, up to 10 years, it was just recovery because, and I don't know how hard it is for people to understand, but I even feel distant from these type of things right now. So if I watch on TV some sort of a conflicts within other countries and you see the physical damage in the buildings, you see what's happening. But I don't think that anyone can understand how big of a damage that is and how extensive the consequences are, because you can't just fix it. It doesn't just, let's just patch up these buildings and build them, and it's like 2 years and it's done. It takes many, many years to recover, both economically and then also just to lose what are the reminders of the civil war in the country. It's really bad. So I was very young, but I remember all of it and what it really means for a person living over there, that you kind of continue to live through the hardships of the war even after the war has ended, right? So when you want to study, your options are limited because half of the buildings of the universities and faculties have been ruined. So right after the war, you would only have certain options. So whatever they managed to, patch up and fix and put in place. And then they focused only on certain occupations to make sure that as we're coming out of this, we have people to do certain jobs. And it was mostly like medicine, economics and law degrees. So pick and choose from one of those, or maybe like electrical engineering or something like that. And that's just, those are the 4 options. Choose because we have nothing else for you.
Which was what the country needed at the time, I guess.
Yes. And they were doing. Right now you have more, obviously, but recovering. So a lot of restrictions. And then one of the biggest restrictions really was just travel, because everybody knows once you come out of that, it's bad. And then people are trying to get out of the country and they're trying to, even find illegal ways to get out of there, just find a better place to live, which sort of puts the country on red list. And people are screening people from there, and then won't just give you visas easily to come and go somewhere. As a refugee during the war who was able to get away, that went through the refugee process, that's one thing. But once it actually recovers and heals, they really screen you. So to get a visa, like I remember even Italy, like I wanted to travel to Italy. I had enough money to travel to Italy, but it did not have at the time when I wanted to apply for visa proof to show that I'm not going to stay in Italy, because I just happened to have money from this strange like part-time job that I did, and I had no proof of income for that period. And I was going back to school in September, and to them school meant nothing. So for me to apply for visa in Italian embassy, I would just waste my 100, for example, equivalent of euros, 100 euros today to apply for the visa. They wouldn't even give it to me, because regardless of the money and my capacity to travel, they would just be suspicious of me trying to stay in Italy or any other country, right? So I wouldn't even go on a travel visa. You would hit some pretty big barriers. So that's how it went. And then if you want to move, really live somewhere, oh my God, it's like crazy. They don't let you go anywhere. And to apply and to get all the paperwork that you need, it's a pretty big nightmare. And a lot of people out there were trying their best to go everywhere in the world, like trying their best, but it's really, really hard. And we kind of went through the similar process, me, my husband and my son at the time, but I was very focused on it. I knew what I want. I did all of our paperwork, but I knew that I'm not going to give up. And I just kept they kept adding what they need from us and how much more points do we need. And I kept trying to get those points and get everything. And I eventually managed to escape. It's a little bit better. I just use the word escape. It is escape, because that's how it feels like. You feel like you're trapped and you have to get out. So imagine Corona right now with everyone here trying to travel somewhere, and they keep saying like you have a hotel quarantine, you have 14 days, you have to stay in your house if you leave the country and come back, etc., etc. So imagine living that for like 10, 15 years. You don't have a hotel quarantine, but you have so many barriers when it comes to leaving. We were just lucky that the little region, the former Yugoslavia, would let us visit, so we had a place to go and have a peaceful sea vacation, like to go to Montenegro or like Croatia later on, or you would be able to, go to skiing to the nearby mountains, which are part of the region. So that opened up. But if it wasn't for that, everybody would go crazy because no, you cannot leave that country
exactly.
as you wish, when you wish, and visit whoever you wish. Yeah.
Because Bosnia is like, as you said, it's a tiny country. It's not even on the seaside. So like being stuck in a country that small with probably not a lot to do and not many places to go on holiday for 15 years, that would be like drive completely people crazy.
Yes. And then also you just, on top of that, just going back to the living in Bosnia is that, or any country really, I know this, I don't think it just applies to Bosnia, but anywhere where there was some sort of internal conflict, the traumas and the events of that internal conflict last for a very, very long time. And you can feel it. And we're all back to normal. All of these 3 ethnical groups that were in war live together right now. Me as a child and adult, I've never seen any of them differently than myself. Like I would treat everyone the same way. However, there's groups and people over there that are just still struggling with the concept that we're going back to living together. There's still a lot of hate. There's still a lot of stories about what has happened, and a lot has happened, some of it pretty severe in terms of violence, and you just can't just forget it, right? So on top of that, you have this internal conflict that's there that just won't let you go, and that you keep reliving it through stories, you keep reliving it through the resent of the people. And then on top of that, you can't go anywhere. I'm very glad that they can now. And I think it changed maybe, I want to say 6 years ago or so. It changed so that obviously the citizens of Bosnia can visit European countries for the just travel and visitation purposes. And it really even changed the people, to be able to see the world outside of your country and outside of your, regional country, which are the same as Bosnia. And to see different perspectives, that helps with healing. That was needed. So the longer you keep the people closed up in that space, geographical space, the longer it takes for them to heal. But when they, go and see other people living, and like even if you go to Switzerland or if you go to Germany and you see all of these people living together, and not all of them are technically Germans, but they tolerate each other. They're completely the same. It has nothing to do, doesn't mean that they're going to go into war because there's different ethnical groups in Germany. That's not how it works. It helps people heal. It helps people see a different perspective. So I think it's very, very important. But unfortunately, when we were there, that was not possible, which made it priority to try and find a way to get out of there at the time.
Yeah, but even just taking a break after a war was over and everything needs to be rebuilt. And if you can afford it, if you can do it, even like getting out of the situation, just to have a moment just to relax and enjoy life, even just something like that was impossible. Even just.
Yeah. No, it wasn't impossible entirely. It was just very difficult for most groups of people, right? So if you have a really good job and if you're extremely wealthy, you would be able to leave and come back, right? It's not for anyone, but for the huge majority of people, like middle class, it was really very hard to get out and travel outside of the country because of the bureaucratic barriers that you had to go through to be able to go and visit somewhere in the world, right?
Which those people were the people that probably needed the vacation the most.
Yes, exactly. True.
Yeah. And how old were you when the Civil War started?
I was 10 years old. 10 years old.
Really young.
Yes. So 10 to 14, I actually lived with short breaks of maybe like sometimes a week or two, or I think on one occasion a month, where we had to leave the town that I lived in and spend, a couple of weeks with relatives in Serbia. Other than that, we have spent most of our time in the Bosnia during the war. And it was very unusual to grow up. Even all of this right now happening really reminds me of that. But it was an unusual childhood. It's a lot of like go outside and play and then come back inside, go into the basement because there's going to be bombing or just us playing. And then there's like gunshots, not sounds of gunshots, but actually seeing bullets like shooting in the grass next to you while you're playing outside with your friends, right? Or like being able to see tanks like going up and down your street all the time. So noisy, by the way. That is very noisy to listen. And then I don't know, we used to collect bullets, like bullet shells. Is it called the shells? Like when the bullets that have already been fired, and then we used to collect them. And then in our rooms, we had, like every child that I knew in my neighborhood had like a display of the bullet shells that we collected. And then, you can find the big ones from sometimes, and then it goes all the way to the smallest one. And then you learn like from which type of a gun they're coming from. And then we trade if we have duplicates, like people do with stickers. That was our childhood, like pretty much. Like I had a lot of like grenades blowing up in my backyard. Like I have a big backyard around the house, my family home, and they would just blow up, and there was like this huge hole in the ground, and then they wouldn't let us go like for a little bit, and then they would go and check it out and then try to find the little shreds of the big grenade that exploded, and then collect that as well because it was like nice and shiny. And then like who would get more and whatnot. I was very fortunate that despite all of this happening for 4 years, none of my immediate family members got killed. So I was spared that trauma, luckily. Not a lot of people can say that, but I was just lucky enough that none of my immediate family members, the people that I was surrounded with, got killed during the war. One of my uncles died in the first 2 years of the war, but he was mostly close with my dad, and he was the one who felt most that loss. But for us, like people that were our core, that lived with us and around us, they have all managed to survive the war, which is kind of, when you think about the way we lived those 40 years, kind of miraculous. But as a child, you don't really feel a lot of that, and it's not as dramatic because I guess your brain protects you from these things. You don't feel the stress that adults feel, and you just sort of go for it day for day. We didn't go to school all the time. Occasionally, they would sign like a peace. Now the word escaped me now, but when you like sign that there's not going to be any fights for the next, for example, month between the conflict sides, and then we would get a chance to go to school during that time, and then they would open up schools, and all the teachers would get called back into civil service, and then we would go and try to sprint through the whole grade in like a month and a half. And they would actually give us like final grades and everything. So a year worth of schooling would be packed up in a month and a half. So whatever they can give us. And yeah, that it was unusual, to say the least. Very, very unusual. We watched a lot of movies. Like they take us out maybe once a week or twice per week to the town center, to a video store. And then you can rent videos, whatever they had. Pretty much they had the same thing that they had when the war started. So we just like grab movies and then watch and rewatch them so many times. And especially during the times when we really had to stay inside and when they wouldn't let us out. Watched a lot of movies, played a lot of games indoor, and just waited for it to be over. And it finally did when we were 4 years later. Yeah, and it ended. So
that's absolutely crazy. For me, it's like even crazy, like thinking like with the mentality of the 2021, it's crazy. Like there's a civil war out there, and the parents will send kids playing outside. It's even just that. It's just crazy that kids survive. Now parents are scared to let their, I don't know, kids going on a bicycle without an helmet. They can injure.
Even if you ask my mom, and I did ask her, like, how did you and she said, even when she goes back thinking about it from this perspective now, she doesn't know what she was thinking, right? She's like, I have no idea what the hell was I thinking. But then she said the only explanation that I can come up with is that the shock of the events and the daily life for her as an adult, like, really blocked her rational thinking. She said, if anything like that should ever happen again, for example, even from this perspective, she's now a grandmother, right? I would pack up and leave even without the kids. I would never sit through something like that. She said that's one thing. And the second thing is that they never really knew it's going to last that long, because same as with social media and news at that time, like the local authorities or our local news would keep saying, oh, we just need 1 more month and everything's going to get cleared out. And then they would say, with just 2 more weeks and we're almost there. This whole thing is going to stop. And that's how they pushed them through 4 full years by constantly saying, we just have a little bit more and then this whole thing is going to be done, right? And then also like this is pretty extreme. The things that are happening around you are so extreme that you are constantly thinking in survival mode. And at that point, you don't really make the regular parent decisions that you make normally. I remember that she would send us to spend a whole day at like during summer, to spend a whole day at a riverside beach. But this river, you should see this river. Like nobody would send their child to swim in that river without adult supervision. She would there would be 20 children and 1 adult taking care of us. Like this, it's a big river and it's pretty has a pretty quick stream of water and has been famous for, killing people who were not experienced swimmer. That's where we learned how to swim. That's where they would send us because it was closer to the border with Serbia, which was considered to be a safer place to be because the conflicting parties would never shoot that close to any of the borders surrounding Bosnia because they wouldn't want to provoke other countries, right? And then they would just send us and we would spend a full day. I'm talking I'm there at 10 a.m. I come back 6 p.m. With my brother, 20 of us with 1 adult. And funny enough, that lady, she didn't know how to swim. The 1 adult that was taking care of us, she didn't know how to swim. It's just, crazy. And she would do that. And that would be perfectly normal. And we lived through that. And I don't know. It's just, I think it's the shock. And I think even when the pandemic started, I talked to one of my daughter's teachers, and I was saying, I just hope that this is not like the war. And he says, what do you mean like the war? Where they keep saying just 2 more weeks and then we get the cases under control. Just 2 more weeks and then it goes for 10 years because I don't know if I can handle it, right? It's just a little bit too much. And that's how it happened. But that's how we grew up. And that was very unusual. But then for people that go through these things, these people, they want to, and same for me, they just want to, forget it. And they want to get out of there, get out of that cycle and try and find better life for their children. So naturally, me and my husband decided to do the same thing. There's still people, obviously, a lot of people living over there. Not everyone feels that way, but some of us just were done with that, done with the whole story and wanted to change scene for ourselves and our children to make sure that they do not go through the same thing.
How long did it take for you to leave Bosnia?
The whole process, I think, ended up being, if I remember correctly, probably maybe 2.5, 3 years. And it was mostly because at that time they already had something similar to the Express Entry where it was guaranteed 18 months processing all of your paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm sort of counting in moments where I was trying to apply and I would have just enough points and they would just overnight change the list of occupation that they're accepting and then I would get kicked out of there. And then I would have to wait for another a year to get enough points for my part-time job that I was doing at the time on the side, something that I was doing because then I need more years of experience. And then when I got that, you just have to grab the papers, submit it because God knows they can change it again. So I think when counting that in, I want to say, I can't remember, maybe 2.5, 3 years altogether. And then, but once I actually submitted the paperwork to come to Canada, to the moment we got the passports in our visa, it was just maybe 14 months altogether. So it wasn't too bad.
Okay, no, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. I think it took me 20 months for me to get my permanent residency from the time I applied to the time I got an answer. Yeah. So 14 months is...
Yes, I feel that they even do it if you're here in Canada. Sometimes I think that they stretch it out even longer. That's how I feel. But at that time, they had timelines. I remember that it couldn't be more than 18 months. So it was less than 18 months. There was a small thing that we had to get, additional paper that they asked me to do. So that, I think that they were aiming for a year at that time, but we went a little bit over a year because some additional paperwork that was needed. But it was pretty smooth. To this day, I remember getting that email and knowing that I have to open it and not being ready to see what it says in it. Are they inviting me for the medical exam or they're not inviting me because that pretty much means you didn't get it. And seeing that, like I couldn't open it. I remember that moment sitting in my chair. It was in my office at work, and I can't open my eyes. I don't want to see it. And then all of a sudden I see, like, you have to go and do your medical. I screamed. I was so happy. Oh my God, the whole, like, my colleagues, everybody's like, what's going on? What's happening? I was like, we got it. Yeah, at that time it wasn't a popular thing because we have already, like, rebuilt good chunks of Bosnia. I was doing really well. I had a really good job. My husband had an excellent job. We were, like, participating in our community and community work, and we were just, good, productive part of our community at that time. And we lived a good quality life. So people, employers, everybody around us didn't really want us to go. So nobody was happy other than me. I was really happy because you really put, you really put so much effort into it, and you have to go. You know that this is your path, but it really depends on this one person that's going over your papers somewhere in office, I believe at that time, maybe in Nova Scotia or in Vienna embassy or whatever it was. I can't remember, but it all comes out to this person, and it really means everything to you. So I think that's everybody who's gone through it knows what it feels like, right? Mm-hmm. To get that famous notification.
But why did you decide to leave Bosnia after 15 years, after, like, you went through the war, even, like, recover pretty much? Mm-hmm. What was the tipping point that you said, I want to get out of here?
I was on a short trip to visit my family in UK. And I knew even before that, sometimes even as a child, I knew that I cannot carry. And I read a lot about it, right? Other people talk about it as well. There's, I think they call it, like, DNA trauma. Like, you carry it for too long. You get it on over to your children, like, through genetics. Everybody keeps carrying this trauma that has happened because of some, to me, very silly and superficial reasons. Like, what are we talking about? We had a war over a piece of territory. I couldn't care less about a piece of land. Like, I honestly, like, geographical regions mean nothing to me other than the beauty of it. I mean, if it's pretty, it's pretty, but what else do I have from it? Yes, I was born there. Yes, that's where my family is. Yes, that's where they have property, and that's where I grew up. But it's just a geographical region. And, to fight over it, go through the Civil War and lose so many people, like, so many people died, and not just died, but some of them died in brutal ways. So much of hate over nothing, right?
And destroy your history.
Everything. Like, couldn't even care. Like, even the history, I don't care. But, why over a piece of land are we having this huge dispute? Like, who wants it? Take it, man. I couldn't care less. I'll just go somewhere else.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're fighting for your own country, you should care about your history, your foundation, and you destroy them, like, by bombarding them. So what's the freaking point? I never understood where it was. So I'm totally with you about that.
Yes, no, I am pacifist. I don't even know, like, if it's it. And also, you know what? There's actual historical monuments in our country that got completely ruined during the Civil War, that were not even ruined during the Second World War, right? That have stood as witnesses to some really bad times and then have been there for centuries. And then we ourselves, people living there, destroyed them during the war. And one of them, and I shared that on my Instagram once, it's when I visited the last time, one of them is this famous bridge over a river called Neretva in Bosnia in the city called Mostar. And it was built, I don't know, like maybe in the long time ago, built. Beautiful. During the Turkish occupation, the Ontario Empire occupation, they blew it up during Civil War. It was protected, like almost like UNESCO protected, whatever was relevant at the time before war. They blew it up. They rebuilt the bridge. So after the war, right, these international organizations that put in money to save this monument, they have rebuilt the bridge, connected it. It's a beautiful little town, but the bridge connects two sides of the town. Each side has a different ethnical group living in it. So we went through the war 4 years. So many people died. We blew up the freaking bridge, the historical monument. Then somebody came, built it for us. There's still two ethnical groups living on different sides of that river, connected with that bridge. And there are children living on one side that have never crossed the bridge and went on the other side. It's the same country. It's the same town, the same municipal, everything is the same, but we still have kids that were born on one side and never crossed over the bridge and went into the. It's absurd, and it just carries over. Like, what do these kids don't even know? They were not even born during war. They don't even know. Like, how do they know that they're not supposed to go there? How do they know that the other side is not their place? There's so many tourists over there. Like, people from all over the world are still, and they keep going, from one side to the other, whereas people that live there do not cross there. So it's absurd on every freaking level. But it has happened. But in order for me to avoid that ever happening again, I knew that we needed to leave, and I knew that we needed to find a more peaceful solution. And in a way, I always saw Canada like that, right? It was like a Switzerland of the American continent. Yeah. The South and the North. And that was that's what drove me to apply. But the tipping point, if you asked about a tipping point, I went to visit. Oh my God, I hate V&W. I went to visit my family that lives in UK. I was working full time. Finally had all these things that I can get the visa for. I snatched the visa. They were so confident that we can get it. They were pretty stable over there, inviting me, guaranteeing for me. So I was supposed to go and visit them. The moment I stepped on the UK soil and started interacting with people, I saw, and that was venturing outside of the Bosnia, I just saw this new world. I saw these people. I would approach people and they would start conversations about the books. Like, have you read that book? Oh my God, you gotta read this book. Did she read this book? Did you read in English? Oh, can I get that book for you? You have to read it. It's such a beautiful book. It's just, it changed my life. And then I would sit with their friends and have coffee or tea, whatever. And they would be like, I just want to get a boat and, travel from the country to country, in Mediterranean. We want to spend our summers like that. We need a big sailing boat, and we've made plans. And I think next year we can get it. And that's how we're going to spend our summer. And then, I really want to learn French. I have to learn French. Those would be the topics that people talk about. You go out and then people are just and then they read sad books, and they would give me sad books. And I would ask them why do you read sad books? I don't want to read sad book. I don't want any sad book. I was a pretty avid reader. I started reading when I was very young, and I read a lot of really, really heavy books and sad. It's not like I've never read a book, but I'm now in my 20s, and I go to this new country, and they're all fascinated by these sad stories. Why do you guys read sad stories? And there's but it's just to feel human emotion. But then I realized, why? Because there's nothing sad happening around them, right? They're not constantly reminded of sadness around them. People have decent life. So they look for these books to see what it looks like to live, in sadness. And I see it everywhere around me. Every time I go outside of my house, I don't want to be reminded again through the book that I'm reading during, my leisure time. And I was like, okay, so this is it. This is what life looks like on the outside. I got to get the hell out of there and never come back. Well, I do come back, but that was the plan. Yeah. I do go to visit my family, right? But that was the tipping point. Back to your question. That was a very long answer. But that was the tipping point that really switched me to, okay, we have to solve this, and we have to get out of here, because people outside of it there think about, what type of a drink, and oh my God, discussions, what food they like. It's I didn't know people can have 45-minute long discussions about what they like in their meatballs. I couldn't care less. Just give me food to eat. But it's the life. It's the lifestyle that's so relaxing that their main really problem. And to this day, there's that commercial in Canada where the two guys are sitting and talking about whether, I think, cheeseburger should have bacon in it or not. And we watch that, and that's always a reminder for me. That's always that. It's a McDonald's commercial, but two Canadian fellas talking about problems of that they have. And that's
first world problem.
Yes, and that's whether they should have bacon in it or not. And I'm just this is not. It's crazy, but I wanted that life. I wanted, and I'm starting now slowly. I'm really proud to say that I'm starting to have those discussions myself, where I can sit actually with people over dinner and talk about what type of a seasoning I like in my food. And it doesn't blow my mind, so I love it. They're making progress.
I have a fight over if the burger needs to have cheese or
Yes,
bacon or
yes,
not.
yes. So, and even at work these days, and people would say like, but what? Or I would come like to work and I would look at and they would say, what happened? I was like, I'm sorry, I'm late, but I had to get out of 2 trains. And they said, but why'd you get out of the train? Because there was 2 strange people on the train. And they say, so every time there's a strange person on the train, just get out. Anyone who acts in any way suspicious, on the next stop, I get out and I wait for the next train. Sometimes I even get off the whole subway, like go out on the street, walk another block to the next subway and then get a next train just to make sure. And to me, that was normal behavior. There was like, it wasn't a problem that I was late at that time at all. Like my work that I do has really nothing to do. They just had a question. Like it wasn't like, oh, why are you late? But more like, what's going on? You usually come at this time. So I would tell them what I did. And they were like, do you guys ever do that? And they said, no, never. It's like, what do you mean never? No, we don't. I don't even look at the people on the subway. What do you mean you don't look at the people on the subway? I go in and I scan every single person. I'm constantly looking for potential threats. Like who can endanger me so that I can avoid that situation. And those are the, that you bring with you and you're not even aware of that. And then that's stuff that I wanted to get rid of, right? And that's the stuff and UK was a huge trigger. And it's still one of my favorite countries in the world. If there was ways to move over there, I would probably move over there just because of how they opened my eyes to the world at that time and how they made me like realize I knew it was better. I just didn't know it was this good to step out of that, constant rhetoric about the same thing, which in our case in Bosnia was always the conflict that we had.
Okay, so was Canada the only option you had, or was just the country you wanted to go?
Yeah, we could go Australia or Canada. Now, I'm not much of a heat person, and it was too far to go to Australia. And so we decided for Canada. There were other options that were less permanent in terms of what you can do. So you could go and try different things without knowing whether or not that will result in you getting a permanent status in that country. Putting my hands on the table again. Without me knowing that that's going to be like a permanent status in my country. Now, to get the permanent status in that country. Now, what I wanted to do, because at that time I already had one kid, I needed to be sure that wherever we're going, we're perfectly fine, 100% sure that we're going to stay there. In terms of paperwork, we can change our minds, but I didn't want to be in the position where I have to think about, is this permanent or not? It had to be permanent. So in that sense, there were 2 permanent options, and that's Australia, where you can get like permanent residency before you actually even land there. And that for me was Canada or Australia. And as I said, the Canada just meant in a way peace, in a way just meant being neutral. That's what it meant to me, like being neutral. And I love that. And I looked forward to it. As soon as I realized these are my options, I knew right away UK is going to be a long shot, almost impossible. And then once I picked Canada and went after it, it was really interesting. But it wasn't like, I grew up believing I'm going to live in Canada. I never even considered that, right? I didn't even think about it, but it turned out to be really good.
Very good choice, yeah. So going to the UK was impossible, or wasn't easy to get a permanent residency in the UK?
The only way at that time to go to UK for us was to go on a tourist visa and then try to find ways to stay, okay. Which with UK was a very long shot. So we never had, I know the Italians often go in that because especially before the Brexit, because they were part of the European Union, there were different options. And even before, they just treat different countries differently, but for us that was pretty much the only way. Majority of the people from my side of the world that live in UK got there during the war as refugees, and even for them that was a challenge, because even for refugees they take you in, but they really find very efficient way to get you out once the war is over. So only the best ones stay even when you come on a refugee status in UK. So they're really good at protecting themselves, and they never had an official immigration program that we could have applied for. So that was not an option. And as much as I loved it over there, I'm not a type of a person that would just go somewhere and try something, right? And I had a kid at that time, so that even made it worse, and I wouldn't want that on my kid. Mm-hmm. So I only wanted the solutions, and it had to be English-speaking country. I preferred to go somewhere where it's English because it was easy for me to communicate in English at that time.
Oh, so you were there pretty much fluent in English when you moved?
Oh yeah, that was also one of the gifts of the war. I taught myself how to speak English during war because we had a lot of time on our hands, and after watching so many movies, I realized that I'm picking it up. And then when they would let us go to the libraries and schools, I would bring a bunch of textbooks from schools. And I just went through like all the lessons, reading and, trying to figure out what I could. And when I was 11, I told my family I can speak English because I was so confident that I can speak, and they all laughed. They thought I was making things up. Anyway, fast forward, we had the Peace Corps come in. You know how the Peace Corps come from all parts of the world, and they from Netherlands, I think we might even have Italians that were part of that particular
I think the Peace Corps is only from the US. I interviewed Ray. He moved to Mexico from the Peace Corps, and he told me it was just the US that you have to be from the US to be on the Peace Corps.
It could be that. So there's different types. So we had Peace Corps, we had United Nations, and United Nations has army. I didn't even know until they came to like Bosnia. So they would come and they would have white tanks instead of green ones with UN written on it. Then there was S4, which is specifically United States, and they were called S4. So there were different groups coming over the course of the time. And at that point, there were people who were speaking English that came in. I can't remember exactly which of those groups came in when I was still very young, somewhere halfway through the war. And they came to our town, going around. One of them was trying to ask somebody something. I noticed, I approached them and I said, in English, like, is there anything that I can help you with? And he was like, you speak English? At that time, no one spoke English, right? Because we didn't have English in schools. They just started introducing it before war. We were a former communist country. Russian, German were taught in schools. We did not teach English in schools. And so no one, it was very hard to find somebody to translate. And they came in, and then, before my parents were like, what did you just say to him? And I was like, well, I'm talking to him in English. It was so funny. And then, the whole, between the troops, the word spread that there's this kid in this town and she speaks English, and they would all come just to talk to somebody, right? And they would ask me things. We saw this. What does this mean? We saw that. What does that mean, right? Because they would just walk around freely around the town, obviously, in their vehicles or whatnot. They would come in, and then my parents started running this little stand because everybody would come over there. They would sell them gums and chocolates, whatever they can smuggle in the country, and then we made business out of it. It was very funny. I actually learned how to speak. Well, I taught myself how to speak English when I was very young. And then I continued working on that, obviously, later to make it better and more proficient. And sometimes I feel at this time, now that I'm living in Canada, that my English is really worse than it was before. And I don't know why. That may be confusing. Maybe I'm getting old or whatnot. But I still obviously have a lot of challenges. It's never going to be my mother tongue. But I learned how to speak pretty early. And that was one of the gifts of being extremely bored during war.
But why English? What was the reason you decided to go with English and not something else? Because you thought that was something...
The movies. All the movies that they would let us, the tape.
Yeah? Oh, they were all in English. They were not in your language.
Yeah. They were all American movies, from the video. Every single one.
With subtitles? With
subtitles. So all the movies. So there are subtitles. Yes. And then I would watch and rewatch because you get 3... Are they called V or WHS or VHS? VHS tapes.
Yeah, VHS.
Those the big tapes that you have VHS tapes. And we would get those tapes, and we'd get maybe 3 movies to watch, and we had the whole week, and they have a lot of time. So you watch each movie 5 times. So try watching a movie in any language for 5 times, and you'll notice how you're learning the language because it's the same movie over and over again. And this was a very young, rested child brain. And I picked it up, and I just realized after a couple of movies, wait, I understand. And I started writing down words in my notebook that I would just write them down in my own language, but phonetically, as it says in English. And I would write down the meaning. And then when I finished the movie, I would just read all the words one more time, repeat them out loud to make sure I memorized them. And that's how it started. But it was because all the movies were in English, obviously, nothing else.
That's crazy, because how do you even know what the meaning of a word? Because when you read the subtitles, there's no like literal. It's not the first word. It's the first word that says. It's the I don't know. How do you? I don't know. It's impressive.
I guess it's just after 5-6 times watching, you start to pick up, you see the little nuances, or maybe, I don't know, but I just picked it up and it was so funny. And then I grabbed the dictionaries and the notebooks from our local library in our school when they would let us to bring something outside. And then I would start comparing them, looking for the words, trying to learn how to write them correctly, going through the lessons, and that improved it, helped it become better, etc., etc. But yeah, it's a funny. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves that story. English, and I can never forget how I told my aunt as well. She was much younger, and I said, "But I do speak English." And she said, "Okay, if you do, can you say something in English?" And I would, for example, say, "Hi, my name is Jadranka, and I live in this and this town, and I grew up, I was born, etc." And she would look at me, and she's like, "Well, how do I know if you're saying it in English when I don't speak English?" "Well, why do you ask me to prove it to you?" I still to this day hold that against all of them for not believing in me. I mean, if my kid came to me and told me that they speak Chinese, I wouldn't know if it was really Chinese.
Exactly.
Fun.
I would pay to see the video of like your parents, like the face of your parents when you were talking with the soldier.
I know, this is so fun. It was like, you actually speak English? It's like, and everybody like completely like can't believe it, like stunned. What just happened? I'm like, I told you I can speak English. So funny.
That's so funny. And a bunch of the questions that I got here, you pretty much already answer them. Like the biggest upside about emigrating, it's probably we covered that pretty clear.
Yes. Well, coming to Canada, you know what? We can just jump into that because I feel like I talked so much about Bosnia and that ugly side of our history, and then completely ignored this beautiful country that we live in. And I know that you have people on your podcast that are moving, but not necessarily just to Canada, but everywhere in the world. But I really, and there's people that struggle a lot when they come to Canada. So there's absolutely nothing perfect about this country. So when I say this beautiful country that we live in, I call it like that. I'm a citizen. I've been living here for 9 years now, and I very much love it, like it, and see it as my own country. And for that reason, I'm well adapted here. When I say I'm not nostalgic, I mean, I miss my family, but I don't miss my country, right? So I found an easy path. I knew what I wanted. I came to Canada and accepted this beautiful country. And there's a lot of people that move and cannot see the beauty of it. And there's a lot of people that struggle and miss a lot. Their home countries, their life, their families. And from all of those emotions and all of that nostalgia, they sometimes don't see how beautiful the country that they're right now in is. I am definitely not one of those people. So coming here, I did have challenges adapting to the society as anyone would have, and being East European, super direct and the way we are. It's hard when you come into this very soft-spoken country. So I had my challenges. I came right at the time when I started building my family. So I had challenges in terms of, building my career at the same time because I had to start all over again. There were a lot of challenges. But I think what's for me really, really unique is that aside from all of that ugly history and everything that I ran away from, I love that I got the opportunity to live here. And I think there's still a lot of people that do. And I think that there's a lot of every time I listen to these podcasts and people talking about their journey, there's a lot sadness when you talk to the people that have moved away, right? There's a lot of people that are very nostalgic, that are questioning their choices, that, I don't know, feel, okay, maybe I should have moved to a country that has a warmer climate. Canada is not a tropical country. You should have checked that out before you moved, Yeah. I should have moved to a country that's more, capitalistic. Well, we're not really like 100% capitalistic society. We're somewhere in between. You should have Googled that before you came here, right? And there's things that you just have to accept about a journey coming to Canada. And I think that in that sense, I am very well aware of what I have given up on and what I have over here. And I learned to love this journey. That being said, I have had many difficulties. many, like on a daily basis. There's so many complications. Like if people want to come and live in Canada, you will bump into so many different complications.
What was the main challenge?
For me, the main challenge was really learning to communicate and to be soft spoken, to be less direct. For example, in terms of communication, the second challenge that I experienced was most often immigrants coming to Canada have to go 1 step, 3 steps, 7 steps back in terms of their careers. So they have to go back and take another job. I was also changing careers coming to Canada. So I went back to the very beginning. So, all of a sudden I'm 30. I have one kid. I had one kid on the way when I came to Canada. So 6 months pregnant when we landed here. So I'm a new mom in a new country. I have 2 kids that are small, tiny, and I'm building career from the start. So you know how when you start your career and you're like 20 something, fresh out of university, and then somebody says like, who wants to come on Saturday? We really need help. And you're like, I'll come on Saturday. I have nothing else to do because you really don't have anything else to do. Now I'm competing with people that are 20 something, have nothing else to do, but I have 2 kids at home that I have to rush to. So that's a challenge. That's an immigrational challenge. That's a challenge when you accept to change something and give up on certain things to get something in advance. And I want to say a third challenge really is the fact that you lose your village when you midlife move to Canada. So for me, as somebody who had kids, I have lost my village when I moved to Canada.
What do you mean by that?
It's like a female term, like where we say we have a village to support us. So it's not just the daycares to help you raise your children. When you're a woman, you have, moms, aunts, friends, all of these like circle of people that grew up with you that you have acquired during your life, and they're all your support group. And then you land into a new country and you have a zero support.
Yeah.
No one. So those are my big challenges. And I can't say that they were easy. There were times when I was just, oh my God, desperate, wanted to fly, wanted to do big things, wanted to, take these like crazy jobs. And I just had to say no because I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be able to commit. I needed to commit to other things in life. There were times when I made mistakes by, speaking too openly and directly to somebody about something that I shouldn't have because I didn't know. There were a lot of adaptation mistakes. It wasn't perfect, but that doesn't mean that Canada is not good. Canada is very good. It's a beautiful country to move to, and I think very open to immigrants from my perspective. And for that reason, I find it a good place to start. So I don't know how other people feel in the world. What are the new trends with immigration where people are trying to get? But I think it's a beautiful, safe harbor. And we really, really enjoyed our time over here for the past 9 years. And I had another kid. So now I have 3 kids in Canada. They're all Canadian, 100%, which is so funny. Their first language is English, which is also so funny. Like, they're my children. I gave birth to them. They're me, but we have different mother tongues. So they laugh at me when I speak. I laugh at them when they speak Serbian. And it's very funny. It's a different type of an experience, but definitely something that we like and that we enjoy so far very, very much.
And what's the best thing you think about Canada? What's the best thing that Canada gave you or the biggest reason that kept you staying in the country?
That's a very good question. I want to pick one. I think I would still say the big part of it is Canada remaining, well, it's not as neutral as you want it to be, but as neutral as a country can be in the sense of how we react to the worldly events, right? So something happens in the world and how we react to it as a country. I loved that. We sort of, yes, you can be neutral always. You have to take sides. And I get it. And I can see those little nuances where you take the sides, but you don't really believe in that. We just have to. But we have managed to stay neutral about it. We have managed to stay those peaceful people. So if you talk about Canadians outside of Canada, everybody's like, oh, it's those like peaceful people that, enjoy saying sorry and thank you for everything and, doing all the nice things. That's not true, but I love the image of it. There's some pretty nasty people here, but I love that when I step outside of the country with my Canadian passport, I am no longer seen as, the East European crazy woman. They used to see me because they do see you like that. Like even my friends here that I met from other people from other parts of the world, they would sometimes talk to people and say, we have these friends and they're from Bosnia. Where's that? Oh, that's East Europe. How can you be friends with them? They're so rude. They're so abrupt. They're so direct. It's not true. We're not all like that. But you do get a little bit, especially being from Yugoslavia, get a little bit of bad rep. And then as soon as they see your passport, they think that you want to do something. You want to stay there. You want to, and for me, the big, really upside is now wherever I show up with my Canadian passport, it's like, oh, guys, what is the reason for visit? What are you going to do? You can tell. You can tell that they don't see not even a little bit of a threat in you. Nothing. Like every little border officer that I speak with, and I've traveled quite a lot and I've been to different borders, everybody's immediate reaction is friendly to your Canadian passport. It was never like that when I showed up with my Bosnian passport. I can tell you that 100%. And those who do not have those different passports, they don't know the feeling, but I can tell you 100%. They look at you and they're like, even now, like I have friends that would, for example, go to Switzerland and they say like, some of them speak English, some of them speak some German, and sometimes don't want to share that information. And they would hear like officers making comments between themselves about, oh, what does she want? Or what does he want? Probably going to try and stay here, right? It's so horrible. And I know it shouldn't happen, but I just got rid of that. And I love it because, yes, it's still a problem, but at least not my problem. And I hate to say that. Like, I want to solve the world problem, but for now, I'm just focusing on myself. You don't know it if you haven't been in those shoes. But yeah, that's the big thing. Now I'm finally seen everywhere I go as Canadian, and I love the image that we have, although it's not 100% true. But to some extent, when I talk to my neighbors and people, older Canadians, even the younger, you see that. I don't know if you see it, like in communication with other people, but you see that gentleness that they have, that human decency that they try to maintain, regardless of how bad the situation is. For most people that are like educated, and I want to say, well, not just necessarily just educated, but, educated and that are just present, like people that are just okay with themselves here in Canada. When you talk to them, you get that sense. It's almost like from the books. When you talk to some of my neighbors, I just sometimes feel like, did I just jump into one of those like movies about Canada? The stuff that they tell me, you can't even believe it. So that spirit and that image is well alive in the country, although we do not necessarily all portray it. There's very bad people, but I love that image. That's, I think, best part about my Canadian life is that I am a Canadian now.
Have you ever thought maybe now that you got a Canadian passport to move to England or move somewhere else?
I think it's still a little bit far-fetched. My family and I have these big plans that we will take some time off and travel the world, in the sense that we're going to go and like spend 3 months everywhere we want to go, right? So for now, that's my target. I don't think that it's possible. Everything is possible in life, but I don't think I have the energy left in me to commit to a life somewhere else once again, to change, because in a way you change identity when you move. I don't know if you have felt that, but there's a big part of you that changes when you move and assimilate in a new country, and you sort of never go back to being that person that you were when you lived in your native country. You never become 100%, for example, in my case, Canadian. But I definitely change. I change my identity, and that takes energy. Takes energy out of you. And I don't think I have. Maybe I have energy, but I just don't want to use it on that. I don't want to use energy to change identity. I love to live in UK, like me, myself, just me. It would be perfect, right? For me. Would it be perfect thing for my whole family and us, and change that we go to? Not so sure about it, right? It's there's something gentle about Canada that not UK, but just the whole Europe is a little bit more hardcore than us. And I don't know if I want to go back to that. But do I want to take the opportunity that I have this passport and that I have, the friendliness of everyone when I show up at their border? Yes, I kind of want that. I want to see what life is like in other parts of the world with the safety net of my Canadianism, sort of speaking, not just my passport, but just, that my home is Canada, that this is where I am. But let's go and try like 6 months somewhere, right? Be digital nomads, work from somewhere else, do something different, or 3 months, or I don't know, 2 months even, right? I would like we travel. There's, for example, we go to Italy. We went to Italy before. We would go to Italy and spend like a week or 10 days, right? But why not go to Italy this time and actually, like rent an apartment and see what the life looks like? Because when you go to Florence, that tourist area, and that's not life. You
No,
have
it's
to
different.
find, outside, and live with those people and see what is it that those people do every single day on the suburbs, like on the outskirts of the city, where there's no cultural monuments. It's just people going to work every single day, coming back, trying to pay their bills and taking kids out to the park. And that is something that I would consider in terms of our future. But I would not necessarily consider, now that I have a Canadian passport, doing the whole transitional journey of permanently changing my address to anywhere, because I only have so much energy and so many personalities that I can process inside of me. I can't add more layers to that. Maybe if I was a little bit more of a person who can live somewhere but not change, I would be able to do that. But these experiences change me, and I don't want to change again. I'm comfortable like this.
And do you like the person that you became, like now being in Canada?
Oh, yes, I do. As I said, again, on the toughness of the life that we have had, although I have to say, like my family, my upbringing, aside from these outside events such as war and living in a country that has gone through a lot, I really had a very comfy, very beautiful childhood, like a beautiful, stable family. So I had the privilege to grow up like that. But the country and the environment changed me. And I was a rough person in many, many ways. And decisions that I made, the way I was processing information, and that completely changed. I became much more sensitive. I love that. And I think it's only like maybe it took me 5 years to try and process social issues in Canada that are not immediate. When you see, for example, back in my country, if I would see like this whole like huge area of the city that people live in poverty, and I know that they struggle, and I know that they're doing everything they can, but they can't make the ends meet, and then that really hurts. But in Canada, you don't really see that. There's no these like big eminent things, but there are social issues. So you can see like nuances of racism. You can see nuances of discrimination. You could see social issues such as homelessness. And as Jadranka, the land in Canada, I couldn't feel for that. Like these little things for me was just, toughen up. I was too hardcore, right? And the best thing about how I changed is that I've learned to observe every single person and see these smaller social issues that have big impact that before wouldn't even bother me. Like, man, if you have an opportunity to make money, live off the money, just do it. Like, don't come up with reasons for this and that. Or like, if somebody tells you something, just go report it to the police. I didn't have, it took me a little bit of time to soften up to these things. And again, you have to understand where I'm coming from is just, it's hardcore. Like, people are not very sensitive about how anyone or everyone feels. And I brought that with me here, and then I learned and I changed it. But now I'm looking, I think now I'm like, everything is like, ecology bothers me. Sustainability bothers me. Like, I have these new things that I didn't know, like, it was so first world problems, but I wasn't even thinking about it. So now when I go back to visit Bosnia, they all are like, oh my God, you softened up so much. Like, it's a disaster. And then if I talk to my friend, she's like, please don't ever come back to Bosnia. You wouldn't succeed in our society. Like, you would be ruined. And it's just little things. Like, they would even make a joke about something, and I would just find that hurtful. And I was like, what you guys, how can you make that? It's so inappropriate. It's so horrible. Like, how can you even laugh about it? Like, I would start following this account on Instagram because they would be encouraging me to, follow what's happening back home. And I would start following. And then their jokes were just, to me, brutal. No, I don't want to. Like, it's just, I can't accept it. And then I would say that to my friend, and they would be like, you're done. There's nothing. Like, there's no going back for you. You are now officially too soft to live here. You can never come back. It's like, luckily, I don't have
Canadian now.
I'm a Canadian. So that's the best change in my personality. And I don't know, like, depending on other countries, but I've learned to pay attention to little things. And I have softened up, but I love that side of me now. And I love that I can see different things, and I can, observe these problems, and I can feel what other people are feeling, and don't worry about not just, my life today and now, but just worry about society as a whole, and know that, there's these little things and we can fix them. We can work toward them. We can show compassion when you talk about them. And that I learned that here in Canada. I didn't have it before. Definitely didn't have it before.
Okay, that's pretty interesting to see like that change and be aware of how much you change just moving to a new country and have a different environment.
Yes, it's just you have to. I mean, you adapt, but it took me a while. I have to say, it took me a while. It didn't take right away. It took a couple of years for me to build up that, but I don't think there's going back now. Like, there's no going back now from this.
And was the same for your partner, for your husband?
Yes. It was the same for him as well. A little bit different. And he was more unwilling to accept that the change has happened. But it's also it's always the wake-up call when you go to visit and you talk to people and you realize that, some things are just making you like twitch a little bit. Like when people are talking about it and you don't even dare to speak against you're just like sitting there observing yourself and seeing that people across, the table from you are not reacting to it the same way. That to them, that's normal. But to you, you're just like, that's not true. That's definitely not something that we should be discussing or saying in that way. So that's how he started seeing it as well. And to this day, like our children teach us these things. It's funny enough, you can never catch up with like native Canadians, people that have been born here in terms of being sensitive to certain issues. But it's our children, like my son constantly reminds me that sometimes if I make a comment about something, he's there. And then I'm surprised, like, but no, I didn't say anything wrong. And he's like, I don't know. Maybe you should, take this and that into consideration. And he gets that from school. And so we still learn. We still learn from them. We're still not completely there, but we have definitely changed a lot from the moment we got here.
You got 3 teachers now.
Yeah, they are. That always ends up being like that.
Now I wanna kind of change subject and talk about the blog that you and Sylvia, which I interviewed before, have, and it's called the Practical Immigrant, and that's where you try to help other people moving to Canada.
Yes.
Like how long have you been doing this blog for now?
It's been, I think, just a little over, actually a year. It's going to be years soon. I think in June, it's going to be full year since we've been writing this blog. The idea has been there for a long time. And the main thing, and I think I touched on this earlier during our talk, is that we were constantly discussing, my friend Sylvia and I, and she's Brazilian Canadian. We constantly talked about, her background is psychology. So we always talked about these like feelings and how do people see their new life, how they struggle. And we would always go back to the fact that it's not about what's it like in one country, it's about what you expect it to be like. So in economics, because I have business background, we have we measure customer satisfaction by measuring expectations versus reality, expectation versus what was delivered, right? So if people have huge expectations of your product, if you sell it, that it can cure some sort of miraculous disease and it doesn't sell, obviously your consumers won't be satisfied. So it's same for life. You have to be really careful when you're building your expectations about something, right? So if you build these huge expectations, the chances that you'll be disappointed are big because reality is never like that. And we felt that, especially in this age of Instagram and digital image reality, where people are presenting things in a way that's really just exists in this one moment and one picture. People are building expectations about life abroad that are not realistic, and that many people talk about these beautiful things, but not a lot of people talk about, oh, but what are the difficulties? What are we going to be faced there? And how do we overcome those? And what are you going to be experiencing once you land? And we, two of us, really wanted to focus on that. So we started out with the whole concept of expectations and reality. And then we addressed subjects that people do not like to address. We addressed, how are you going to find work in Canada? What are the struggles of looking for work in Canada? And how are you going to manage money when you come to Canada? It's a big thing. Like, yes, you can make money here, but expenses, the cost of living is huge. What are the ways? So you're going to have to change your ways in terms of how you manage money when you move to Canada. Yes. Does anyone ever say to you how to do this? No. And we really wanted to share that information. She's a career coach and a longtime recruiter. So she does a lot of the posts that have to do with practical aspects of getting a job and what are some main mistakes that immigrant candidates make when they're applying for jobs. And I touch on a lot of the financial issues that people have. We have a good system in my household, and I have a business background, so I always calculate everything. So we're really good at, saving, investing money, and finding ways to live more productively, and I contribute in that sense. So we do touch on a lot of touchy subjects that people don't like to share, numbers, share reality of what's going to happen when you apply for a job, because believe it or not, as an immigrant, you are not considered the same and equal candidate in comparison with a native Canadian. You're just not.
Especially if you don't speak the language.
Yes.
I think because if you come from an English speaking country, the situation is different.
Oh, yeah. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Going back to what you said before, I saw that not as much here in Canada, but mostly when I moved to New Zealand, you do from your career back in your country, you do 5, 7, 10 steps behind. You just go backwards for many steps just because you don't speak the language. And in my opinion, you sound stupid. You sound like you don't know what you're talking about, which is, I think for me, is totally normal. It's totally normal. It's just the way that our brain or that we perceive people.
Yes. But with the, with certain streams of immigration here in Canada, you actually do have to take and pass a very difficult English language test that gives you the minimum that you really need for a corporate job, right? Still, that doesn't mean that you will have the same things and that you will be seen the same as a candidate that's from an English-speaking country, as you said, because, definitely immigrant from Bosnia is not looked upon the same as immigrant from UK that has a beautiful British accent that everybody wants to talk to.
Yeah, exactly. If you come from England, for some reason, people already think you're smart. Just because
exactly. Oh my God, that is so funny. I find that the same thing, and everybody just wants to hire them. They just want to listen to them talk, man. Nobody wants to listen to my accent.
He must be smart. He's from England. He must be smart.
Yes. And they do dress up nicely for work, and they do sound smart, but just because of the fancy accent. But so it's not, but you know what? But it's not impossible to show all what you can do. And there's ways, and Sylvia really helps with that. And so in the blog, on our Instagram page, and on our LinkedIn page, really, we talk a lot about it. Yes, you can go over these things. You can learn how to do this. You can master these things. And in Canada, it's also I have colleagues that would move from US and they would have trouble adopting to the communication style that we have here, right? They speak English actually as, better obviously than all of us, and it's their native tongue, but the way people express themselves in the business culture in US is very different. When I work with US clients, I sometimes feel like it's just another Bosnian that, just doesn't have accent. When I talk to them, it just I get flashbacks from, working with people back in Bosnia in comparison with Canada. So there's these little things that really make a big difference if you change them. And she really specializes in working with people where she can help them adopt to this new situation and get a job that they really want, a good job, a first job, but also, good job or a better job, get a promotion. And then we share that information and we love it. But we also share like day-to-day struggles and how it feels to, miss home, miss your parents, miss your siblings, miss the life that you had. How does it feel to be the odd one in the society? Because sometimes you live in a neighborhood where there's not that many immigrants, and then you sort of you're sticking out. Is it that the expression where you stick out like a sore thumb? Everybody can see you, and everything that you say is very different, and how that feels. And we address all of those things very openly and talk about them. So I'm really inviting everyone that's listening to check us out. It's called The Practical Immigrant. We have a webpage, which is thepracticalimmigrant.com. And then we are on LinkedIn and also on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Everywhere, pretty much.
Yes.
And what do you think is the main challenges that people face when they move to Canada? Are the same challenges that you have to face, or they are different?
I was actually talking just recently. We were talking to this couple that teaches English and preps people. They live here in Canada, preps people before they apply for these exams and before they apply for visas. And I think it really depends which country you're coming from. So certain countries have different regimes, like visa or immigration regimes with Canada in comparison with other countries. So I have learned that South American countries, because of what used to be called NAFTA agreement, have a more flexible way of getting into Canada. Now, that means those people come here to try living in Canada, which means a lot of them come with no plan and their language levels are not adequate for life in Canada. And then the main struggle would constantly be language. So this couple, they work a lot with Portuguese speaking people coming here. And they would say the one thing that's the biggest obstacle is really the language. And the second thing is really the lack of plan. So you can get a student visa to come and live in Canada, and people come with a plan that goes as, okay, I got a student visa, I'm going to start studying, I'm going to bring my wife or my husband, and I can work 20 hours and then I'll figure it out. So that's a big problem. You can't just figure it out. You need to have a very concrete plan. You need to be really realistic about how well do you speak language. And then you have people that have to go through these steps before they come to Canada, and they actually have to take a very difficult English language exam, come here fairly prepared, in which case English is not an obstacle to get a first job, but their first struggles start happening when they try to get the job that they had back home or the job that they really want. In which case, those cultural differences step up. And it's not just about accent, but it's really about not understanding how this culture works. And then they struggle and they start suffering from the fact that they cannot show how much they know and that they cannot realize their full potential in Canada because they cannot get that perfect job. They cannot get a promotion that they want to get. And that really comes down. Yes, to some extent, you have to improve your English, but you really have to improve your communication in general. And that's where they really struggle. And the third challenge is the immigrants that have already been here for a while, that's starting to see things that bother them. And then they go into the negative thinking and start sort of blaming everything on Canada, and then projecting that onto, missing back home. And then the main struggle is really being stuck in between these two worlds. I miss my life that I had before. I'm not doing anything about improving this life. I'm stuck in the middle and I'm just angry and upset with everyone. And that's a big thing. So that's more like a psychological barrier. But with these first two groups, it's usually English language and finding a way to stay permanently. With the second group is the cultural adaptation and working toward, as I said before, you do have to change. Sometimes you willingly, sometimes it just happens to you, but you do have to adopt and change, and they struggle. And then the third group is really the psychological barrier of, being stuck in the middle. I don't have a translation for it. There's a book that we read with the kids, but we call it a floating chimney. So you have a chimney, it's not connected to the ground. There's no fire, but it's just up in the air. It's nowhere. There's no fire. There's nothing going through it. It's just floating in the air. It has no purpose. And that's what we call the people that are stuck in between the life that they had. They can't go back to it. They know that they're not the same, but then they also haven't realized their full potential here in Canada. And usually it has to do with the lack of cultural adaptation to the new country.
Yeah, I think we covered this with Jimmy. I don't know if you listened to that episode. I think it's a great episode. I spoke with Jamie, and she wrote a book about like how to move abroad. But we talk about in this episode about the adjustment cycles. So that every immigrants, when you move abroad, you have to go through these cycles. And if you don't push yourself, you don't try to integrate, you get stuck, as you said, like in this limbo where you kind of become judgmental. And I totally do that. And I think that's normal. That's what she says, like everybody goes through these cycles and everybody gets judgmental because things are different from your country. Like we were talking about in this episode, like the silly thing, like going to the supermarket and don't find the ingredients where they're air quotes supposed to be because you grew up and there's certain ingredients or certain products that are in these different aisles, and you move to a new country and they're completely somewhere else, so you can't find them, and you get frustrating and you start becoming judgmental about like why they're doing this. It shouldn't be on the other aisle. Like a silly thing like that, but can become bigger and bigger if you don't try to integrate, if you try not to move forward into these cycles.
Yes. And did you notice that? I don't know, like depending on how long have you been here, but I remember when I moved that some of the comments that I made, the people would recognize them immediately and knew that I was a newcomer. They would knew that I'm here, that I've been here for like a year or two, just based on what I said. And it wasn't even anything judgmental or criticizing, but just me making any type of a comment. And I find myself to do the same thing now. So as soon as people try to talk about certain topic, I can tell right away that without anything, like, okay, maybe year 2, 3 tops. As soon as they go into these like crazy philosophical things and, the irrational stuff, I'm like, 25 years minimum. Because they're like, they want to retire. It's no longer like, we're not even talking about like life here and there anymore. They're just fed up with the whole like cycle of life where, you grind, you work, you go back home and whatnot. And you can recognize those little like moments as where are they stuck up on, or if they're talking about, trying to do this and they won't do me. And then, you feel the confidence, but you see the struggle. Past 3 years, 3 to 10 must be 3. You can tell. They don't have to tell you anything. You see these little things. Just recently, conversation we had with somebody, and I was like, these are, and I didn't even like, because of the COVID, I haven't met a lot of newcomers, people that just landed. So now they're becoming a little bit of an endemic species. When you see somebody who's like, wait, did I just heard that comment? That's a newcomer. That's a newcomer. Where is it? Seen that one in a while. Because there's those specific comments that are really tied to the people that just landed, like within a year. Well, I don't know, but just little thing, as you said, like a supermarket comment gives you away right away. Because if you are still stuck on, where what to be in the supermarket, year 2 max. Like you gotta be at the beginning, because after that, everything. Like you can't, then you go back home and you're thinking, like, why are these things in the supermarket here? Like there should be somewhere else, right? You switch, but you can tell those little things. Or if somebody makes a comment that's a little bit, like from my country, when I hear a comment that's a little bit, as I said, tough, I was like, oh, these are here. Like, they have not learned, how it goes. This is a newcomer, still a baby. I call them babies, like immigrant babies. And that's what people called me. And I remember those specific moments when they would be like, take it easy, like going, through the honeymoon period and then switching to reality and then, getting hit hard by different things and obstacles. And they used to say when we got here, you kind of need 2 years. To be realistic, you need 2 years. You need 2 years to pass by going through these steps. And then 2 years, you become to be a little bit realistic. Everything until then is just your reaction to what's happening to you, because it's such a big new experience that it's hard to make some conscious decisions and, final conclusions. And I was like, no, I was maybe like 6 months in Canada. Like, I got this. I already know this. I know everything. Like, I felt so confident. 2 years later, I was like, oh, maybe they were right.
Yeah.
I do think differently now. So it takes a little bit of time. But that's the case with everything in life, right?
And I think that's the good time to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Jadranka, to share your story on my podcast. It was a pleasure.
It was my pleasure as well. I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful conversation. And yes, I'm here. If anybody wants to reach out or has any questions, my email is on the website, and probably we're going to share it on Instagram, and you'll see it on Danielle's profile. So yeah, reach out. We love to chat with people. We love to, oh my God, new immigrants, reach out. I love to hear stories. Like I feel bad now that I said these things, because I do get that super, when a mom sees, or when you see a little baby, that's why I call them baby immigrants. When I see a little baby and you go like, oh. So when I see somebody who just landed, or like people that have been here for a long, I do get that same feeling where it's like, I get you. I know exactly where you are, and everything's going to be fine. So yeah, reach out through the social networks or our website, and me and my partner Sylvia as well. We're here to chat and to help out everyone.
Perfect. Yeah. And as usual, the links and everything will be in the show notes. So go check it out so you can find it more easily. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jadranka. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can find the show notes with links, insights, and much more at emigrantslife.com/episode 47. And if you enjoyed this episode and want to support the show, you can share this episode with your friends. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And one more thing before we go. If you want to move to a new country and you need help, feel free to reach out to me either via email at daniel@emigrantslife.com or through our website, emigrantlife.com. It's absolutely free. I don't charge anything for it. Just reach out to me and we can schedule a call. I look forward to meeting you. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao.